Hello again, this is John Arnold. I'm the community advocate for ETS, and I'm wearing my video interviewer's hat right now, doing another segment of interviewing on ETS Insights. So today, with my latest guest here is going to be Mike Bates, who's sitting to my right here from Intel, and we're going to talk a bit about sensors, machine M2M, machine learning, and some really maybe esoteric sounding things that are a little removed from everyday grid, but this is kind of a big part of the picture about where things are going. Wouldn't you agree, Mike?
I totally agree.
Great. So thank you for joining us.
Of course.
And why don't you tell us first a bit about you and your role at Intel there?
Well, my official title is Global Energy Director, and Intel Energy is both oil and gas and utility. And as we've talked about this last few days, the term utility is an amorphous term. It could mean the grid operator, it could mean the retailer of energy to the customer, and it could even be the generation side of utility. But generally, it's one of my areas of focus, and we have a team at Intel that's building what I would call end-to-end solution plays to solve business challenges within this industry. It almost always includes a prime contractor that's reselling solution plays that have Intel technology inside them. So we support a lot of the new kind of market making type activities. We also support through technology ingredients to solve the bigger kind of segment wide issues.
So 5 years ago, most people wouldn't have associated Intel with energy. What's changed?
I think it's even today, folks don't automatically go to Intel in energy, and I think it's one of those areas that over time I think folks will start to understand kind of what our contribution is. But when I describe or answer that question from a very broad level, it's replacing carbon with silicon. So you can imagine as the industry moves from more fossil fuels and central generation to more distributed renewable energy, our company is working to embed silicon at the edge and up the entire value chain to have the grid and the energy system operate more efficiently. And if that's the case, the result is less reliance on fossil fuels. So for example, we're embedding our technology at the edge to be able to track and monitor the growth of renewable energy resources that are consumer owned, and then providing that information back to the utility for them to be able to forecast the growth of those consumer owned assets, and then to resource plan in a better way. Resource plan around what they buy or purchase to supply electricity to their customers, but even more importantly, I think, to help them understand where they need to invest in the infrastructure of their grid. So if you can imagine, if we've got enough intelligence at the edge to be able to go back to the grid operator and show them where the pockets of distributed resources are growing and maybe where they're not, then they can start applying investment infrastructures in those areas in anticipation of further growth and maybe less investment in infrastructure where they don't see it growing.
Okay. So on the panel yesterday, you guys talked a bit about machine learning, kind of tying to Internet of Things, bigger picture themes, M2M capabilities. So how hard is it to get the utilities to see the value of this, given their legacy-based grids, which can only take them so far?
That's a great question and a really hard one to answer, because part of it is to do with who we're talking to, and is it a utility that's providing the commodity of electricity like a retailer? There's a value prop there for machine to machine. There's also an interoperability. If you're talking to a utility that's a grid operator like a CenterPoint, there's a different value proposition there. But if you start from the grid side, one of the examples that we use is, I would call it edge compute versus cloud compute, or some people use the new term fog. And fog is kind of another term for a cloud. It's just a low-hanging cloud, if you will. But at the edge, for a grid operator to be able to make decisions real time, let's say this is a grid operator that's relying on intermittent consumer-owned assets as a load. for them to be able to have that energy look and act like baseload, decisions have to be made to optimize the intermittent resources real time at the edge. So I think that's where machine to machine and edge compute fills a major gap in what exists today in the grid. So today in the grid, it was, as everyone knows, it was designed for one-way flow. Then it's now beginning to move towards a two-way flow of energy. And the old style of data analytics, data collection, and decision making isn't fast enough to be able to adopt. So putting edge devices, machine-to-machine devices at the edge allows the utility to operate more efficiently in the new energy model. So that's one example.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's going to give you another good example is on the other side of the meter, where we have, the homeowner of the future that might have energy production on the rooftop. They may have some storage to be able to optimize that energy production. They may also have an EV in their garage with an EV charger. Each one of those systems might be closed proprietary systems on their own. And on their own individually, there is a value proposition, but you can imagine what the value proposition might be if all those devices talked and learned how to operate more efficiently together. So you could get one device from your local retailer and install it, then get another device maybe from your utility. Having those two work together in concert to optimize, I think it enriches the customer experience, and even more important, I think it drives a higher value prop for the utility.
Yeah, that's the B to B to C line you were talking about earlier.
Yes,
right.
yes.
So just the last thing I want to bring up is, yes, in this afternoon's one of the sessions, one of the speakers talked about the utilities today are typically running about 54% efficiency. And so what's realistic? I mean, let's say all of this machine learning could really come into play and, as you say, make things go more efficiently and respond more quickly to all the data. What's a realistic level of efficiency you think utilities could get to?
I can't tell you exactly even where the 54% comes from. And I know there's a lot of waste in the current system. Where we could get to in the new energy model, I mean, I'm not prepared to say what that percentage might look like. I know it's going to be more efficient because I think we're going to, with the customer's participation, be able to optimize those loads. But I can't sit here and give you a percentage. I mean, it won't be 100, but I think it'll be better than 54% for sure.
Yeah, well, and that's probably as close as we can get. But our themes at this conference of tech transformation, emergence, convergence, and humans all comes into play for that. And one of the big takeaways that I've seen is the emphasis on the human side of it.
Yes.
And I think no matter how well we automate the grid, it still has to be run by people, and the energy has to be consumed ultimately by people.
No doubt. And I really think that that's where we are today. I think the drivers in the new model are the consumers that are moving into this space through new market entrants. And I've been in this market for many years, and I think when I first started, I felt like the utility was going to be the entity that drove the evolution of the new energy model. I think a lot of utilities, for various reasons, don't have the appetite or maybe even the ability to engage customers in these deep participatory ways. So the next phase, I thought the regulatory bodies and the policymakers were going to be able to set rates and regulation that opened the market up. And it's not to say that that's not occurring. I think there are great examples of where that is occurring, where regulation is opening the market up for the new model. But it's still pretty slow, and it takes a while. But I think what's happened is the new market entrants and interested consumers have kind of filled that void. I mean, you see it, the solar cities, Google and Nest and Vivint, and I could name the list names forever, even Lowe's with their own Iris systems. I think those new market entrants have filled the void, and consumers now are more aware that they have choices in terms of how they consume and produce their own energy. I think that's really opening the genie out of the bottle. I think that's really what we'll see next year when we talk again. I think there'll be more examples of that, and I think 5 years from now, it won't even be a question. I think everyone will recognize that the consumers rose up and drove the market in this direction.
Yep, I agree, and we heard that message yesterday too, kind of this revolution, what's happening, but it's coming from the grassroots, the bottom up.
Yes, it is.
I think that's the best way for this to happen.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. All right, with that, Michael, we'll say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy your flight back.
I will.
Thanks for coming and speaking again this year with us, and hopefully we'll have you back next year.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Okay, Michael.
it. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, that wraps up another segment here for ETS Insights. John Arnold signing off for now, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, John.